Our podcast today is concerning the East Palestine train derailment and toxic tort tragedy that happened in February of 2023. And with us today is Boyk law attorney Wes Merillat. Wes, why don't you start by telling us about your background?
I'm an attorney with Charles Boyk Law, and I focus my practice area principally on complex litigation, as opposed to kind of single event things that usually involves mass torts, class actions, cases where there's numerous plaintiffs against a defendant or multiple parties on each side, sometimes different jurisdictions. So I've been doing that for Boyk Law for about 10 years now, and we litigate cases all across the country.
This is a class action case. Wes, what other types of cases are you currently litigating and in what courts around the country?
We litigate principally product liability, consumer type cases, pharmaceutical type cases. We're involved in toxic tort cases such as Roundup, Paraquat. Roundup is a multi-district litigation. That's out in California. We've been involved in that one for litigating that actively for several years. We're involved in product cases such as 3M, which is a military defense contractor. They supplied defective earplugs. That's the largest mass tort in history. There was over 300,000 plus claimants in that litigation. That one's down in Florida. We're out in New Jersey, we're in Indiana, we're in Illinois, all federal courts. So we're litigating these things from one coast to the other.
In February of 2023, the train derailment made national news for several weeks. Remind everybody where this occurred and some of the details of the crash so they have a better understanding of the background in this case.
East Palestine is a is a town here in Ohio, and it geographically it's stone's throw from the Pennsylvania border. It's right near West Virginia, so it's on the east side of our state, and it's a small town. And it was Friday, that February 3rd, that news broke of Norfolk Southern's train derailment, and it's a real devastating thing for that community. We immediately watched the news. We immediately appreciated the how catastrophic it was to that community, and then we started to get calls.
Can you talk about how it happened and what is the impact of this disaster?
These things are still being developed. The factual understanding of how this began and how far back it went. But what we do know is this is your classic story of corporate greed. You got Norfolk Southern. You got a company that is paying its executives their compensation packages are based on bonuses for how much revenue they generate and how much cost they cut. And they did a phenomenal job of doing that over the past 4 years. They cut safety. They didn't update equipment. They cut jobs that were related to safety. And what we saw on February 3rd was probably accumulation of that. This train was traveling from Illinois to Pennsylvania. It is a train that has earned a nickname as Nasty, 32 Nasty, because of the condition that this thing is in. And shortly after it took off, they have these detectors all around the route that measure wheel temperature, wheel bearing temperature, axle temperature. I mean, these trains are 2 miles long, so you've got a few people up front, you got maybe some in the back sometimes. They rely on these detectors. These detectors are going off, saying, "Hey, the temperature on train car, 28, it's going up, and it goes up again, and it goes up again, and soon it's over close to 300 degrees. It's on fire. They can't bring the train under control. It's coming into East Palestine. It derails, and it happens to be carrying 100,000 plus pounds of highly toxic, highly flammable, highly explosive chemicals. Over 1.5 million pounds of this stuff, and now we have a catastrophic event.
I think the initial reaction of many people was, how could the federal and state governments and the company allow this tragedy to happen?
Yeah, the train industry, I think historically, all the way back from its roots, is never going to do anything above and beyond what it has to. It constantly lobbies and fights regulations. It is a critical industry for our economy. They rely on that. The government sometimes defers to that because of the value that the railroads provide. And so equipment doesn't get updated, from the 1990s. You're talking 30 years, and they don't update equipment, and it's cost savings. They're going to add on more trains to this thing to make it longer and longer and longer. More trains, more cars, more train cars, more chemicals. So these things are walking factories, traveling factories through America's towns, and they're running on shoddy equipment.
Can you talk about the lasting impact on their air, their water, and their homes? And what about the possibility of cancers or injuries that haven't even developed yet?
Yeah, this thing, again, I use the word catastrophic, and it doesn't seem big enough. When those trains derailed, they are carrying, again, this vinyl chloride, PVC. Everybody has heard of PVC. VC is the vinyl chloride in that. We use it in everything. It's one of the most commonly found chemicals in our country, and this train's carrying massive quantities of it. It is volatile, it is explosive. They're in these massive pressurized tanks, train cars, and these things are, there's great concern after this thing derails that this is becoming unstable. And some modeling takes place, and they say, man, this thing could explode, and it has the ability, the blast force, to send shrapnel a mile radius each direction. So Governor DeWine's evacuating people. Norfolk Southern comes up with the brilliant idea of, hey, let's release some of this stuff under a controlled release. We'll pour it in a trench, and we'll set it on fire. And you see a mushroom cloud in the news, that's captured, the media's attention, our country's attention. It's a mushroom cloud over this town of toxic chemicals raining down. Norfolk Southern is looking at, well, it's better than vinyl chloride, leaking directly onto the, contaminating their properties. It's better than the explosion. But the aftermath is still this chemical that has spread a massive distance. Hundreds of thousands of people in the geographic area are affected by this. So, yeah, it's in waterways, it's contaminated ground, it has contaminated livestock, it has injured individuals who have suffered respiratory disease. They've been subjected to an incredibly dangerous carcinogen that's known to cause liver cancer. It's killed tens of thousands of fish, wildlife, and that's just in the few days in the aftermath of this thing.
Let's talk about how you got involved and filed one of the first lawsuits in this tragedy.
So we got some calls from people who found us, and we looked at their cases. These are people who were displaced. They suffered personal injury. They suffered lost business. Businesses had to shutter. They had to relocate. They called us. We looked at their claims. Norfolk Southern wasn't addressing their needs, so we did file a lawsuit in the Northern District of Ohio. And other lawsuits started to get filed as well. And then that's what we see kind of develop in what we call complex litigation. It's too hard for a court to litigate hundreds of different cases. So there's different mechanisms where they coordinate or they consolidate these cases, and it can be in this particular one. It's being considered for a class action.
What court is this case currently in?
This is in the Northern District of Ohio. It's in the Eastern Division in Youngstown Court.
My understanding is that there were various factions trying to get on the team and the committee. Can you explain how the leadership committee came together in the first place?
Yeah, so in complex litigation, a lot of times there's a coordination of litigation. And we call that for pretrial purposes. There's some things, they can be claims, they can be facts that are common to everybody. And so courts have an ability to kind of coordinate some activity. And in class actions, there's leadership counsel class counsel that's appointed. In multi-district litigation, there are teams of attorneys, leadership teams that are put together. They're appointed by the court. They're based on their experience, their knowledge, their ability to litigate and prosecute the case. So in this case, there were a lot of attorneys, more than I've seen in many litigations, who were involved in the court. I think did a very methodical job of going through the list of attorneys that were involved, and then selecting and appointing attorneys that the court felt that could diligently represent the people of East Palestine and the surrounding communities.
Based on your experience with these cases, can you explain how you were appointed by the court as part of the leadership committee?
Yeah, the court appointed me onto the leadership team, on the steering committee for the litigation, along with just some phenomenal attorneys from across the country, who have accomplished incredible things. So it's a real big privilege for anybody to be appointed to one of these. It's a terrific privilege to be kind of in the company of some of these other attorneys that have been appointed.
Explain where the litigation is at and the timeline, and what can people expect in the future?
Yeah, so the litigation is we call this at the beginning stages. So we had, there is a complaint that's been recently filed that we prepared, that leadership has prepared for class certification. So that is a process of having the court consider whether this should be a class action or not. And then Norfolk Southern we expect them to respond to that, either motions to dismiss. It's going to become very litigated. The state of Ohio is involved, the federal government is involved. There's a lot of different factions on this. So this is as far as complex litigations go, this one's not only complex, but it has different levels of depth as well. So this is going to be a long process. There's claims involving property, there's claims involving businesses. It's just a wide range of damage that has to be addressed, not only in Ohio, but Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Multiple states are involved. So,
do you anticipate there's going to be a class action that is allowed by the court on this case?
That is our expectation, that this will be formalized as a class action. It will proceed as a class action with the various claims. Ohio claims, property claims, West Virginia claims, Pennsylvania claims.
Is this something that you think will take years to resolve?
I think years is very feasible that this, from a timeline perspective. Norfolk Southern is going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure. There are derailments every day in America. Norfolk Southern, we're all old enough to remember the Pinto, the Pinto, and there's something called the Pinto Memo. And in that Pinto Memo, Ford decided, hey, look, what's the cost of fixing the Pinto, the safety issues that cause it to explode, versus the societal costs of injury and death. And they proceeded under that model. And Norfolk Southern has done the exact same thing. Derailments are part of their business model. They understand they're going to occur, and they look at the cost to fix versus the cost of a derailment. This particular derailment will, I believe, forever change that. This derailment has gathered the attention of the Congress, of the Senate, of our president, of the EPA, the state of Ohio. They're no longer going to, I think, get away of transporting millions of tons of explosives through small communities on wheels that haven't been updated since the 1990s. So I think it'll be an important litigation that it goes slow and really exposes how they failed the industry and these communities.
Besides money damages, do you think this case will change the way we do business in the United States as far as how we transport dangerous chemicals and other dangerous materials?
Absolutely. Railroading has got to change. It is the most efficient method of transporting cargo in the United States, bar none. There's nothing close. But the corporate greed that's been allowed to persist through lobbying has come to, I think, a head, with this particular explosion, this derailment, this explosion, this damage to this town. And I think that there's going to be people that are held accountable. I think that the spotlight's going to be put on these people as what they've actually been doing or not doing that has led to this. These people cared more about getting that railway open as soon as possible than they did about clearing the toxic chemicals out of that town. They cared more about getting their trains running than they did bringing people back into the town. So I think they're under incredible scrutiny right now. And again, I think this will change railroading.
Do you expect a decision by the federal district court about whether or not they will certify a class action in 2023?
Yeah, I would expect that the decision to certify a class will be this year. I fully expect Norfolk Southern to on outside of the court, you'll hear in the news they're going to try to do everything they can to meet or exceed all expectations to take care of these people. But when we've seen that not play out, we're talking to these people, and that's not their experience so far with Norfolk Southern. So I expect them to probably fight on the inside of a court and on the outside, act like they're doing everything in the world possible. But I think it'll be a fight.
Thanks for your insight, Wes. We look forward to updates as this litigation proceeds over the next couple of years. Thank you.